I am James Watt, the chairman of the Department of Asian Art in this museum. And this evening we are going to talk about our current exhibition in the Tisch Galleries. It is a big and complex exhibition, and I didn't quite know how to approach it, so I prepared two versions. But I should give them both. But don't worry, I'm not going to be long. So we begin with this. Now, just to give the historical context, this is the map of China just before the Mongol conquest. Now, what you notice, now this the lighter area is the present map of China. And you notice that China proper was divided into at least 3 states, or 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are sort of extra. But what is important to note is that after the conquest and after the unification of all of China under Kublai, China under the Yuan Dynasty covered all this vast area. But it was only one part of the greater Mongol Empire which extended to Central Asia, the Chagatai, and in Russia, the Golden Horde, and in Iran, the Ilkhanate. So, I mean, it was a vast empire of which the Yuan was only one part, but it was a very important part because Kublai, at least in principle, was the great Khan of the entire empire, although nobody else took his orders in all the other areas except the Ilkhanate. Now, there are only 2 slides for my first version. This is a gold cup of the early 13th century from North China. Now, the form is as old as pastoral nomadism. And the form itself is simple, robust, and made of natural material. But in addition to its nomadic origins, you see a touch of decadence because it's been decorated by incision with some floral decoration. And then a century and a half later in South China, you see this piece, which has the same basic form, but it is soft, it is sophisticated, and it's made of an artificial material. It's porcelain. So that is the end of my first version. That is to say, you transform from this into that. I just learned from sociologists is a phenomenon known as cultural mediation, I think. I think that is the term. But that's it. Now, but to be more serious, actually the first version is just as serious. You have, in addition to these stem cups, you have a kind of jewelry worked in granulation and filigree, which is a gold working technique which was prevalent on the steppes of Northern and Central Asia since the time of Alexander. But it would come into China from time to time. For example, in the Han period, coeval with the Roman Empire, you have this kind of work, which is the same kind of thing, but it disappeared from China after the 9th century and re-enter with the Mongols into North China. But together, archaeologically found together with the northern style jewelry, you have some Chinese work. And you don't need to know about gold working to know this is Chinese, because the fruits look like lychees and they don't grow on deserts, in deserts or on the prairie. But the whole thing is done in repoussé, and that is the native Chinese gold working technique. Now, during the time when the Mongols marched west in the early 13th century, they went through, I don't know whether I can point correctly, through Central Asia into eastern Iran and came back through the Caucasus. And en route, they destroy all the great rich cities of Central Asia. Cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, Herat, and as far as eastern Iran, Isfahan and all that. And they brought back with them the finest craftsmen the world has ever known, and they put them in centers of production, either in Karakoram, the capital of the Mongol Empire, and also in somewhere here, Beshbalik, I think is there, in Eastern Central Asia, where Chinese and Central Asian craftsmen worked together to produce something known as the cloth of gold. Now, this is something that all Western visitors to the Mongol Empire would remark upon. And you read any of the missionaries, and Marco Polo, of course, they all remarked upon this cloth of gold, which is absolutely dazzling. This is a fine example of it in the Cleveland Museum, and you can see, and you cannot see some aspects of the mixing of Iranian and Chinese motifs. The roundel with the adorned winged lines, of course, is basically Iranian. Now I have to explain that Central Asians, doesn't matter what their ethnicity is, at that time, in these very rich trading cities, they were, whether they were in religion Muslim or whether they were ethnically Turks, or they were culturally Iranianized. So this is what the patterns they would produce, but on the background of Chinese clouds. And the weave of this cloth of gold was new to China. It's known as the lampas, in which there's a ground weave, which is its own set of web and warps, which you can see here, and then there's a supplementary set of pattern webs bound by supplementary warps. And these are the gold threads which cover the most part of the cloth, and they give this absolute dazzling effect. Now, when Kublai declared himself in 1260, the great Khan of the Mongol Empire, his cousins in other parts of the Mongol empires did not agree, and especially in this area, which became the Chagatai Khanate, the descendants of other descendants of Kublai's uncles would be stirring a lot of trouble, and there would be a lot of fighting, a lot of civil war, which raised along this area the border between Yuan and the Chagatai. And Beshbalik, the Greek center of weaving, was always being attacked. So in 1275, Kublai decided to move the Beshbalik workshop to Dadu, to Beijing. And there, they would weave cloth of gold. According to the records, Kublai ordered that they would weave cloth of gold for use, for imperial use, for collars and cuffs. And there you see Chaibi, Kublai's wife, wearing a robe with borders of cloth of gold with this pattern. I'll show you a detail. Now, the interesting thing about the pattern is that you see here a sort of griffin head, and you can see the same here. Now this is, of course, not a Chinese pattern at all. This is a Western pattern, which brought in by the Central Asian weavers to Beijing at the beginning of the Beshbalik workshop in Beijing, in Dadu. But later on, the Chinese cloth to go would then have purely Chinese patterns. But in the beginning, you can see the transition from a Central Asian style to a Chinese style over the 100 years or so of the Yuan. Now, these are the more obvious connections between China and Central Asia that we have just seen. But there are connections with Central Asia which are not obvious. If you look at this column, which is actually the corner stone of a great hall in Xanadu, in Kublai's first capital, you will see a dragon on floral ground, and you think, well, dragon is Chinese. But if you look at carefully at the characteristics of this particular dragon, you will see the head has a long elephantine snout, and then you can see also the tail is sort of entangled with the hind leg. And now in the last room of the exhibition, you will see a Central Asian textile, a Central Asian tapestry, which has exactly the same dragon, with this long snout, which comes from actually India, from the Makara, and then also the same way the tail is treated, and also on the floral ground. Now, dragons on floral ground is not a Chinese tradition. This may not be obvious if you just look at a dragon, but that is the case. So this is a less obvious influence of Central Asia in China. Now, many people like this dog. That's why we see it. But now this dog has taken a long time in China to evolve into this style. Now, you see, this is a 13th century dog, and this is a 1st century dog. You can see this is native Chinese style. This is what you can get in the 13th and 14th centuries. Now, how did it get from here to there? Now, we have to go back to our earlier exhibition in 2004, where we traced the origins of the art of the Tang Dynasty. In the 6th century, we had 2 stone slabs of exactly the same subject. Here you have a stone slab from a Sogdian tomb with a princely or royal figure sitting on the stool, an hourglass stool, receiving some tribute from a kneeling person. And on another slab from a Chinese tomb, you have exactly the same subject matter, but here we have a Chinese gentleman receiving tribute from the barbarian. So, but the difference is, of course, one is carved in relief, introduced by the Sogdians, who were highly Iranianized at that time. So these reliefs are somewhat like the Achaemenid stone reliefs, but in China, the emphasis always on the line, and so this version, this picture, transmitted from Central Asia, then becomes transformed into a Chinese picture with very, very fine, elegant, incised lines. And then after that, Hellenistic influence came in, also in the 6th and 7th centuries. So now, again, you can contrast this figure, which is 7th century, or late 6th or early 7th century, to a Han figure. The same kind of comparison we made with the dog. But this kind of sculptural style remained, but only in North China, and especially in the northwest China, in the provinces of Shanxi, and Gansu, the two provinces, which are provinces nearest to Central Asia, of course. So they remain there until you get, in the 13th century, this kind of figural style, which happened only in North China. Now, this we sidetrack a bit because that was an entertainer, and in the exhibition. In the exhibition, we have a special area for theater. Now, I wouldn't go into theater because theater would be a big topic, and we're going to have a public lecture on Chinese theater in the Yuan period later on, I think in December. But I just briefly mention that drama was, or rather the Yuan period was the golden age of Chinese drama. 80% of what you see in Peking Opera and all the other regional operas, the stories would be derived one way or another from one of the Yuan dramas. And of course in Europe, since the Jesuits reported back to Europe of what they see in China, what they saw in China, people began also to be interested in Chinese, in Yuan drama, and people like Voltaire in the 18th century, and in the 20th century, Brecht would be writing plays based on Chinese drama. And now go back to the question of relief versus incised. Now, after the unification of China, in the south, they began also to do relief work. As you can see on this Longchuan bottle or vase. Traditionally, in South China, they would only have decoration by incising on the clay body before glazing, so that the decoration never interferes with the form. Whereas in the Yuan period, once North and South China were integrated, then there was a radical change in potting style. As you can see here, the 8 immortals, Taoist immortals, are left unglazed, but they are done in relief. This is a new direction for pottery art in South China. And another thing is the very form of this piece, the octagonal shape. Of course, it's not a potter's shape. This is a potter's shape where you can imagine it being thrown on the wheel and grows on the wheel to its present form. But this one, you need to use the plastic quality of clay, the modeling quality, to make any shape you want. Now, so these are, and so you can imitate a metal shape. So there are two influences from the north. One is gold and silver forms, and also the relief decoration. And then, of course, also for the first time in South China, you also have sculpture in the round. This is another Taoist figure. Now, I'm not going to deal with religion, although there's a big section on religions in the exhibition. Suffice to say that Taoism, a native Chinese religion, was at its greatest ascendancy during the Yuan period for various reasons, and you have little sculptures of Taoist figures. The Yuan plays are completely filled with characters who are either Taoist immortals, or they are Taoists of one stripe or another. So it was the most prevalent religion, and this is a Taoist figure sculpted in the round, and there's also paintings of Taoist subjects. Nobody knows who this person is. He's probably one of the Taoist immortals. It comes from Cologne, the Museum of Eastern Art. The file on this painting is about 2 inches thick, because nobody can decide on who this person is. So there's so many opinions. But you notice that this dog is the same dog as in the one in stone that we saw earlier. This particular dog, I don't know what kind of dog it is, but he appears in all the Yuan paintings, all the Yuan prints and sculptures. The same kind of transformation from plain to three-dimensional art also happened in all the other media, as in lacquer. This is a 13th century piece, which is in relief, but is flat relief. The surface is actually not modeled. But in the 14th century, you can see a transformation from a flat relief to a high degree of modeling and overlapping. So there's a much greater three-dimensional effect in the 14th century. Another effect of north-south integration is we see first in North China, from about the 11th to the 13th century, you have this kind of pottery, which is decorated with painted decoration. Whereas in the south, you have this very different style. Well, in the south, you have. I hope people in the back can hear me. No? Yeah, good. Thank you. Whereas in the south, you have this very different style, where the form is much more sort of elegant, but the aesthetic appeal depends more on the quality of the tactile and the textural quality of the glaze. When the Northerners came south, the southern potters began to experiment with painted decoration, and this is an early effort, using the same pigment, iron, so the color comes out brown. But sometime in the middle of the 14th century, some Persian trader brought in cobalt, and overnight, blue and white is born, and it never left us. We are still seeing blue and white. Now, this is interesting. This is a kind of double absorption. First of all, you remember the stem cup, and then painting. Now, this is the stem cup is all the way from the far, far north, but from North China, you have painted dragon on the piece. Now, I'm going to just touch on a couple of points about the decorating of blue and white porcelain. You can see most blue and white porcelain of the 14th century, the decoration is done in registers, starting usually at the bottom with lotus petals, which is derived from the pedestal of Sino-Tibetan Buddhist statues, and then you have some sort of border decoration. We'll talk about that in a minute, and also a floral scroll, which are also standard decorative motifs. But the main field of the decoration very often is a scene from a play or a popular story, and they are copied from printed books of popular stories. As in this one, you can see this is the story of a 4th century BC wizard, and you can see the blue and white decorator copied more or less straight, but instead of him riding on a chariot drawn by 2 tigers, I think here one of the animals is the leopard. I mean, so it was not always straightforward copying. They also adopted to their own liking. Now, let's talk a little bit about the wave pattern, which is very often on the border of dishes and also on the lip of vases and jars. Now, this pattern actually comes from a very popular type of painting in the Song period, in the preceding dynasty of Song, from the 11th to 12th, 13th centuries. One of the great types of Chinese painting has more or less disappeared, but during the Song period, from the 11th to 12th centuries, water painting was a major genre in Chinese painting. And not only would you find paintings of water in its various states, from more or less calm, gentle ripples to this big breakers in every mood you have paintings of, and you would find it not only paintings on paper and silk, but you will also find it painted on the same pattern on screens and on the walls of paintings of buildings. At the entrance to the Imperial Academy in the Kaifeng, the capital of the Northern Zone, when you enter the front door, you're faced with a big screening wall of wave painting, and this is one of the few surviving examples of Song wave painting, and is copied on blue and white as a border decoration. But I want to sidetrack a bit and trace the fate of this motif, because it survived into the next century, into the early 15th century, where you no longer have this very, very lively pattern and became a bit stiff and formulaic. You can hardly recognize it as wave patterns. And then another century later, in Turkey, when early 15th century Chinese porcelain found its way to the Ottoman Empire, you have this kind of Iznik pottery, which is supposed to be a copy of early 15th century Chinese porcelain, but the wave pattern now becomes not recognizable. So this is totally beside our point. Oh, sorry, but let's go back to Kublai. Now you see him at the entrance to the exhibition, and this is his portrait, this is his likeness. But this is not the finished product, because the imperial portraits of the Yuan were all done in textile. In the palace records composed in the time of his great-great-grandson, Tuk Timur, it is recorded that, there's a chapter on imperial portraits, and there's a preface to this chapter which says, in the beginning there was painting, and then there was sculpture, which was better, and now we have textile, which is the supreme form of art. And so this chapter contained a lot of instructions of who to ask to actually paint the likeness, and then who was instructed to supervise the weaving of the portrait and the dimensions. And one of the dimensions actually is exactly the same as this big tapestry in our collection, because there are two types. One is the imperial portrait, and another is the mandala, which was woven for the initiation of Mongol emperors, because they all had to go through initiation into Tibetan Buddhism. And that goes back to Kublai, or rather to Chaibi, his wife, who became converted to Tibetan Buddhism, and then she persuaded Kublai himself to convert, and therefore from that point on, every Mongol emperor had to be initiated into Tibetan Buddhism before they could be enthroned. And this probably was made for one of those occasions, and you have the two emperors, Tuk Timur and his brother, elder brother Kokshila, and the two wives. And you can see that this is the painted portrait of Tuk Timur, and this is his woven portrait, although a tiny one, but you can see what it is like to have a woven portrait, because the tapestry gives it much greater texture, and also it gives it an added dimension, because the gold threads are not only thick, but they to give the impression of a raised area. They are sometimes the warps, the webs are sometimes wound around the warps several times before you go on taking it to the other end. So you have the gold dragons coming up quite clearly, and the same actually happened also on the face, but it's too worn for that effect to be seen. But anyway, you can see exactly the same. It is his likeness, this one, which is the cartoon for the tapestry, although this one is only in miniature. Incidentally, in the exhibition you will see a hat exactly like this. Now, when the hat came in, it looked more like a pancake, and the chin strap was separated. In fact, when my colleague and I went to the Gansu Museum to see the hat for the first time, this chain was attached to the top knot. And I asked the archaeologist, I said, did it come out like that? He said, yes. So we took it. I thought, well, this is rather peculiar. But when it arrived in the museum, they took the chain was taken off, and I saw the string was new. So I thought it could not have been a 14th century piece of string. So we reconstructed it according to this painting, and now that's the way you see it in the exhibition. And now there are many examples of what our conservators did to make the exhibition or make the exhibits look the way they do now. I mean, and this is something that I think can only happen in the Metropolitan Museum, where we have expertise in practically every area. Now, finally, I want to say a few words about the acculturation of the Mongols into Chinese culture. We have made the connection between Central Asia and China. We have made the connection between North and South China, the integration of North and South, and the results. And now, what about the Mongols in China? What you see here is another tapestry extremely fine work, looks like a painting, but it is a cosmological diagram, according to the Tibetans. You have in the center, Mount Meru, the axis of the universe or the cosmos, surrounded by layers of ocean and land, and then the four big oceans in the four directions, with the continents, each with 3 continents. And I think we live in actually one of these continents. I've forgotten which one, but all the 4 continents have their color associations. The east is silver and there's white. The west is ruby, which is red. The south is lapis, blue, and the north is gold. And the yellow color has faded on this piece, so it looks like the white one. But reason why I'm showing this is the typical Tibetan cosmological diagram. And in the early days of the Mongol Empire, the great halls in the palace were painted exactly according to this scheme. That is to say, on the east wall you have white, on the west wall you have red, and blue and gold, and so on. And it wasn't until the last emperor of the Yuan that it was changed to, the decoration was changed to Chinese landscapes. And it happened on one occasion when the emperor was about to go to the northern capital or the upper capital, Shangdu or Zenendu, for the summer, as all emperors did. They spent all the summer months further north, and he charged the resident, that is to say the man who was left in charge of the capital when the emperor is away, to say, please have the palaces redecorated. And this man, whose name is Dharma, we don't know what nationality or what ethnicity he was, but what he did was, instead of painting the same colors again, he hired painters to paint landscapes on the walls of the palace. And when the emperor returned, he said, "Oh, well done, this is wonderful." And he actually was very pleased, instead of the same boring colors, to have actual landscapes. Now, this also illustrates something else, that is to say, the later emperors, the later members of the imperial family, were by that time, by the second quarter of the 14th century, 50 years, the last 50 years of the Mongol period, they were so highly syncretized that many of them were collectors, especially the Grand Princess Senge, who was probably one of the greatest collectors of Chinese art in Chinese history. We have 2 vessels actually in the exhibition, which are bear her name or her title anyway at the beginning, in the section of ritual vessels, or because she donated 2 bronze vessels, ritual vessels, to 2 temples, and is described as donations from her. But anyway, they were not only collectors, they appreciated Chinese painting, they actually practiced. No, I don't want to do that. They actually painted in Chinese style. And this is a painting by a Mongol who was the Taoist, who painted this picture for a fellow Taoist, and his friends, his literary friends, all inscribed poems in praise of the painting above. and then, and one of them, this person there, signs himself as Jacob. Now, this was a Christian or Nestorian Christian who they all retain their Christian names throughout the Mongol period. Although they came from the north, they most of them, the Onguts, most of them resided in Inner Mongolia, just north of the present city of Hohhot, in the Green Mountains, just north of Hohhot. And so here we have an example of the acculturation of the Mongols themselves into Chinese culture.
What do you mean by the Chinese style?
Well, I mean, done by a brush. Yes, that's all. I mean, anything done with brush and ink, bamboo. I don't think anybody else does this. I mean, I can't describe it. Not any more than I can describe what is European Renaissance style, right? And now, but in the meantime, Chinese painting as an art form has gone through a major change, which is exemplified by this painting by Zhao Mengfu, by far the most influential painter and artist in the Yuan period. And now this is the kind of painting which would set the model or the standard for subsequent ages. And the emphasis here is not on any kind of realistic representation of a real landscape or the actual landscape, but the emphasis is more on the elegant brush work. And this is how Chinese paintings have been looked at ever since. And this then led to his nephew's painting, which doesn't make sense as a representation of a real landscape, but he is greatly admired because of the brushwork. And the last piece I want to talk about is this. This is the final exhibit in the exhibition. It is a carpet from Kyoto. It used to be paraded around Kyoto every year at the annual festival, at the Gion annual festival. But after it's been dated to 14th century, they don't do it anymore. But you see, what happens is here in the center you have the most typical Chinese painting, one of the most common Chinese subjects some of the most common subjects in Chinese painting, which is plum blossoms. They are actually blossoms originally, but they've fallen out. If you look at the back of the carpet, you can see quite clearly beautiful blossoms on these branches. But the interesting thing is it is surrounded by a pseudo-Kufic border, which is from Islamic art. So you have something which is so typically Southern Chinese, particularly associated with the literati. And then you have something which is clearly Islamic. But even more interesting is this. If you look on that carpet from the side, you will see that the border pattern and the plum tree is now raised half an inch above the ground of the carpet. And the reason is this, that the brown parts, which delineate the main decoration, was woven in animal hair. It is actual animal fur which do not decay in the same way as wool. You you can see that it's really down to the ground. All the woolen parts have sort of disappeared, leaving the part which is woven by with animal hair standing up. Now this is now what does this mean? This means this gives us another connection. There is in Chinese records, which I read some time ago, that people on the steppes of northern and central Asia would weave carpets with animal hair, and no one has ever seen such a thing until this piece turned up. So it is actually true that sometimes carpets were woven in certain parts of the nomadic world with animal fur. So in this carpet, you have then the whole of the Mongol Empire. You have the Islamic world in the west of the empire. You have southern China, the last bit to be conquered by the Mongols. And you have, as part of the construction, following the tradition of weavers on the steppe of Central and Western Asia. And that really sums up even better than the two examples I showed at the very beginning. The material culture of the Mongol world as display in objects, in works of art. Thank you very much. Thank you.